This lesson, I would like to experiment with finding the part, the percent, and the whole in percent applications. Looking at a sentence like this where we say that 30 is 75% of 40, there's no calculating to be done here, but what I want to do is try to identify the different components to a typical percent application problem. In this case, I think we can see that the 75%, we know that that is the percent component. But the 30 is our portion, or our part. I'm going to write both of those words here. Okay, 30 is 75% of 40. 40 is our total. Sometimes you use the word whole. And sometimes I've seen base. Another word for percent very often is rate. So any of those would work. Okay, so you might want to be on the lookout for those terms and know that we're talking about a specific component in a percent application problem. For the most part, I want to promote two different ways to solve for a missing part or portion, different ways to solve for the missing percent or rate, and different ways that we can look at solving for the total, the whole, or the base in our percent application problems. I'm going to use an approach called the proportion skills, where we look at the percent proportion. But before we do that, I want to experiment a little bit in how this evolves. Back when you were dealing with fractions, you might have had something like 2/3, and you needed to rewrite 2/3 with a denominator of, let's say, 12. Okay, back when you're dealing with fractions, what you were doing here is writing an equivalent ratio. You examined and thought about, how did I get from 3 to 12? What do I multiply 3 by to get to 12? And you know that you multiply by 4. We're going to have to repeat that same relationship in the numerator. 2 times 4 would give us 8. Okay, and if we have truly written equivalent ratios, I want us to take a look at our cross products. 3 times 8 is equal to 24, and 12 times 2 is equal to 24. Okay? That would only be true if we've truly written equivalent ratios. This also gives us another method here, because let's just say, I'm going to cover this up here, let's just say I'm having a really blonde moment and I cannot figure out how I got from 3 to 12. I can make the blonde joke because I am blonde. I can get away with that. Okay, I cannot figure out how I got from 3 to 12. This gives me another method. I can look at my cross product. Wherever I have a diagonal of numbers, I can multiply that. 2 times 12 is 24. 24 divided by 3 gives me the 8. Okay, I would call these proportion skills. Okay, and some of us, as soon as I write this, it will ring a bell. Cross multiply and divide. Okay, and I want to caution you that this cross multiply and divide concept only works when you have equal sign in here, because what you're doing is you are comparing equal ratios. If you had plus, minus, multiply, or divide, you would have to use your fraction skills for plus, minus, multiply, or divide. Only when it's equals in here can we use this. And what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at the part to total ratio, and I think we've already examined that ratio a little bit when we were converting to percents, but we're going to look at the part to total ratio equal to our percent ratio over 100. Okay, and we're going to use this to cross multiply and divide to find a missing part, or a missing total, or a missing percent. That is going to be one method that we can use when solving percent application problems. Now another method would be using the equation part is equal to our percent decimal times the whole. Now some of us have seen this before. You can find some materials that set this up in a triangle like this, where we say the part is equal to the rate times the base. And that's very common. You know, the rate times the base here is equal to the part. It really is the same equation here. Part is equal to the percent rate times the base, or the whole. I'm just writing it out in equation, and I'd like to have students think about that in an equation format, because it gets you ready, and it's a great segue into some algebra, pre-algebra skills. So these are going to be the two methods that I would encourage you to learn and develop in solving the percent application problems. Now I'm going to start out with a simple example where we are solving for the part. And I'm going to make up a problem here. What is 14% of 78? Okay. Using the first method, cross multiply and divide, I'm going to set up my structure for the proportion. Now the 14% is a piece of cake. We know that that percent ratio can be written like that, 14 over 100, so that was no problem. So we have got a portion, 14% of 78. 78 is our whole, and that's going to go down here, or the total goes down here. And that would be 78 here. So what we're solving for is our part. So yes, what is 14% of 78? We're solving for the part. So at this stage of the game, any questions that would involve this skill on the GED would be on the calculator portion of the GED. So you could use a calculator, and this is the only calculator that is allowed in the classroom or in the GED test center, and usually it will be provided to you. So I wanted to show you this here so that you could get used to using seeing the calculator and using the calculator that is allowed there. But wherever you have a diagonal of numbers, in this case we have 78 and 14 diagonal each other, that's where we multiply. So I'm going to multiply 78 times 14. Okay, and then I can turn around and divide by my lone term here, which would be the 100. So I'm going to divide by 100 to get 1092. And yeah, we're going to have decimals here because I'm making this up. So 10.92 or 10 and 92 hundredths is 14% of 78. So that is using the proportion method. Now the second method that I showed you was using the equation method, where part is equal to the percent written as a decimal times the whole. So let's go back to our problem. What is? Now is can usually be thought of as an equal sign. We know how to write 14% as a decimal, and then of is going to be identified as multiplication. So I'm looking at what is 14% written as a decimal. I'm sorry, I meant to not write is, but to write equal. 14% written as a decimal is 0.14 times 78. So I'm going to multiply using parentheses to communicate multiplication. So again, back to my calculator. Again, I need to clear this, and we're going to say 0.14 or 14 hundredths times 78 is equal to, voila, got our answer there all in one step, 10 and 92 hundredths. So a lot of times students will say, well, how come this worked so quick and easy with just one step? When I was recording the problem down, I moved the decimal 2 places to the left, converting it from a percent to a decimal. That is equivalent to dividing by 100. So just in coding my problem down, I automatically divided by 100. So all I had left to do was multiply. So here we have two methods. One is the cross multiply and divide using proportion skills. The other is plugging into an equation. That's very easy for the part. In our next video, our next lesson, we are going to take a look at using each of these methods to solve for the percent and also to solve for the whole. Thank you for joining me.